Well, I'm your niece. What was your favorite 2019 horror?
Shh, it's the Film Flamers.
Hey everybody, I'm Robert.
And I'm Chris.
And we're the Film Flamers. And it's time for us to bring you, as promised, our year-end review for 2019.
That's right. We're going to cover both some of the worst disappointments as well as some of the best surprises.
And maybe sort of break it down into some of our favorite, maybe acting performances, special effects, musical scores, things like that.
Mise en scène.
It's like your favorite French phrase. Is that it at this point?
Oui.
And just like last time we did this for 2018, we sort of like wait until the end of January. I think at the end of December, you're flooded with all these like top 10s and here's my favorites and so on and so forth. And we like to think that our choices are a little special. And I think that finally at the end of January, you're ready for them.
That's right. So to kick this off with a high note, what was one of your biggest disappointments of the year?
I'm just going to jump right into it. So I was going through all the movies that I watched, horror movies or horror adjacent movies that I watched in 2019. And I have 41 listed on Letterboxd. So of those, very few were below 3 stars. But a couple of my disappointments for last year were Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and The Dead Don't Die, which were 2 movies that I were looking forward to quite a bit.
And I never got around to seeing The Dead Don't Die, but I do agree one of my bigger disappointments was... well, I wouldn't say bigger disappointment, but a disappointment with Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Child's Play was also a disappointment of mine. And of course, Terminator Dark Fate, which I've talked about. Although my biggest disappointment of the year, I would say, was Us.
Yeah, I liked Us. I think I gave it a 3.5 stars out of 5. And
yeah, I had to give it a 2.5.
Yeah, I wasn't as like supremely disappointed with it as I think you were, but I was still disappointed. I wanted more than what I got for sure. My lowest rated movie of last year was a 2-star, and it was the Netflix original In the Tall Grass, which is a Stephen King adaptation. Yeah, and it was bad.
Well, for me, Us, I just had such high expectations after Get Out that it just felt like... And this is how I described it at the time, that Get Out was such like a lightning strike, and Us just felt like they were trying to, get that twice, and it was kind of forced. I think I need to revisit it because I know I'm probably like one of the only people in the world that rated Us that low. And I acknowledge that. So I need to maybe like revisit it when, my expectations going in aren't so high, because I do still acknowledge that one of the best pieces of acting for the entire year was done by Lupita Nyong'o in that film. But again, my 2.5, and I didn't rate any horror movie that I saw this year less than a 2.5. My 2.5 is right in the middle of, 1 and a 5 star. It's just meh to me, right? So it's not bad. It didn't like make me angry. It was just disappointing because I was expecting like a solid 4 to 4.5 movie, and I didn't get that personally.
And I agree. I mean, I rated it a little higher because I enjoyed myself watching that movie. I thought that the performance was great by Lupita, and even Elizabeth Moss I thought was really good in that movie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I sort of like scaled it up a little bit more. I was disappointed with it though. I have to agree with you. I was expecting, this like high caliber film, and a lot of people out there think that it's fantastic. And I mean, to me, it was just middle of the road. I think I rated it just, slightly higher than you based on some of those other things. In the Tall Grass, though, to me was not a good movie. Like, it wasn't fun to watch. And I rarely ever say that. That was convoluted, and if it's based on a short story, like it shouldn't be too hard to translate to the screen. And for some reason, it wasn't as fun to watch as it was to read. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not my favorite.
But, this is going to be a really small conversation because we got like I have to say, I have like 5, 4 or more star rated films versus only 2 less than 3. You know, there was a really good year for horror. I just want to start off by saying that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and you know, just like we did last year, we like to get our, like, you know, least favorite things out of the way. Because, I mean, I like to spend a lot more time talking about movies that I like as opposed to ones that I didn't. And I have a lot of high-rated movies. In fact, I had 3 5-star rated movies this year in the horror category.
I didn't have any 5-star. I didn't find a perfect movie, but I'm just anal like that. I only have like 3 5 stars, you know, that I've ever given any film, period, I think, you know. So yeah, I'm just a little bit more anal retentive about how I rate things, I think. So that's my problem. But for those of you that want to see our ratings, we are now on Letterboxd, and we have a combined score between myself and Robert. So you can see the official Film Flamers scores for each of these films on our Letterboxd account.
That's right. We have our own aggregate.
Yep.
So, I mean, after covering these disappointments, let's go straight into the movies that we thought were the best, or maybe some surprises of 2019.
Well, you know, I have a lot of films that I just consider good horror, you know, which includes Climax and Harpoon and I Am Mother from Netflix and Annabelle Comes Home and Ma and Brightburn and Velvet Buzzsaw and It Chapter 2 and The Lighthouse and Knives Out. We just had a huge amount of just good horror movies, right?
Really, because you just like took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, there were so many good movies this year, and we had just talked about in our last Shooting the Flames episode an article put out by Rotten Tomatoes that said that 2019 is the freshest year for horror since like 1980, right?
Yeah.
And there were just tons and tons and tons of what I would consider to be really great horror movies. And it's so hard to like create a list of favorites, you know, or sort of like rank them based on like the rankings that I gave them. But yeah, something from that list you just said that I have to say is maybe one of my biggest surprises of 2019 was Annabelle Comes Home.
Oh, yeah.
And
that list I just gave you, those are just my 3.5s. Like, those are just what I consider good films. Like,
I was really surprised by Annabelle Comes Home. I mean, I was expecting to not like it because I really didn't care for the other 2 movies. And it just turned out to be just a really fun, well-made, well-paced, well-acted horror movie. I thought it was just fantastic.
I still like Annabelle Creation just for how creepy it is, but every single Annabelle movie that we've gotten has been different, right? They've been different and distinct from one another, and each one brings something new to the table, which I really like, and it keeps it new. It's not trying to do the same thing over and over in different ways, right? So that's something to be said for that franchise, and a lot of people don't like that franchise, the Conjuring universe. I do, because they always seem to do something slightly different, and they always seem, you know, to try their best at least, you know, and none of them are horrible movies. I would say my least favorite probably would be The Nun.
Yeah, I still haven't seen that one. I have to catch up. I also haven't seen Curse of La Llorona, which came out this year. Yeah, so I mean,
whoops.
Yeah, catching up has to be done for both of us, you know, but like we said, like 2019 was a really good year for horror. I think we really enjoyed all the movies that we had watched, and the movies that he had listed, you know, are sort of like just a really small part of the really good films that came out this year. Some of my middle of the road movies were like the Pet Sematary remake and the Child's Play remake. I thought
mine too.
Were just really, really good, you know, better than I thought they were going to be, for sure. I was expecting to not like them very much at all. And then another big surprise for me was a movie called Sweetheart. Have you seen that one yet?
No, I've never heard you mention it.
It's on Netflix. It came out in the summertime, and it had a really weird promotion behind it. Like, I couldn't tell if it was going to be a horror movie or not, right? It's sort of about a woman who's like stranded on a desert island, and I thought that was really just it. I thought it was like horror adjacent at best. And then it was on Netflix, and I thought, oh, I'll just give it a watch. And it's actually like a creature feature. They didn't even like market it as such, you know?
Yeah.
And so like, it was sort of a surprising moment for me this year. But I mean, I think that we could probably go on and on about the movies that we liked quite a bit, but maybe we should sort of break this down into smaller parts of these films and tackle why we liked certain movies so much in 2019.
Sure. I do want to say something about like music and sound as a category. Clearly, to me, this was a huge year for Bear McCreary. He did Godzilla King of Monsters, which is also one of my middle of the road, 3-star movies that I saw. That's kind of horror adjacency, right? And then he also did the music for Child's Play, and both of those scores are excellent. So I'm really hoping to see Bear McCreary more in, horror scoring.
And this is one of those categories that I sort of just like, give the reins to you to talk about, because I know that you appreciate the craft a whole lot more than I do, or you tend to notice when a score is really good or really bad.
Yeah.
And, it's sort of lost on me sometimes, but I will say that the Godzilla score was good. Like when you shared some tracks with me, I went and listened to all of it, and I liked it quite a bit. Like, it actually was one of the better parts of that movie to me. So.
Oh, but better parts of both of those movies. The new theme for Chucky is excellent and fun. And I think we actually ended one of our Shooting the Flames with it. And we might have actually ended one of our Shooting the Flames with the other score, too.
Well, we did.
For Godzilla.
And if you recall, we did a hot take episode for Godzilla back, in the summertime when it came out, So, I mean, we were looking forward to that movie quite a bit. And, I know we both like the score. I actually ended up liking that song a lot too. That sort of remake of that Godzilla song. Like, I listened to it on repeat a lot over the summertime, so it grew on me.
Some other movies where the music really kind of reached out to me, of course, was I can't not mention Climax. Right. And that's not really a composer so much as is a collection of, either stuff from like the 70s, 80s, 90s, or remixes of dance tracks from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And actually 2000s, some of it was a little anachronistic.
And so this is where like music and film sort of like piques my interest a little bit more. I like pop songs, and I really enjoyed the soundtrack to Climax, especially that opening dance number. I think that you and I watched that quite a bit on YouTube, like over and over again sometimes. On Spotify, that's my number one listened to song this year. I listened to it so many.
What is it called? Super something?
Supernature by Cerrone.
Supernature. Yep.
Yeah, that was my number one played song for all of 2019 on Spotify.
I think I sent people at least like 5 Snapchats of me like dancing to that track, like while I'm driving or something.
But that wasn't like the only pop song from horror this year. I really enjoyed Lana Del Rey's cover of Season of the Witch from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I mean, that was my biggest takeaway from that movie.
The best thing about that movie. Yeah. I actually let the credits play when I watched it at home later. But my biggest call outs, I think, for music would be Dr. Sleep by the Newton Brothers, who had a hard job of kind of trying to take that original theme from The Shining and kind of weave it in and do very much their own score for this very different story, as well as the music by an actual like a DJ of a band or whatever, or the lead of a band. I forget what it's called, like Haxon or something. And it's by Bobby Krillick, and it's for the movie Midsummer. And he did an excellent job making this really kind of folky, dark, creepy, and sometimes beautiful score that's very atmospheric. And so if you guys have a chance to listen to these in isolation, if you have any interest in film scores, Dr. Sleep, Midsummer, Chucky, hell, even, Godzilla, and of course, Climax are good places to start for the year.
And I would also throw Knife Plus Heart into that mix, which is done by M83. And it was good. I really enjoyed the like giallo aspects of that particular score, and it's completely listenable. Outside of the movie, I think it's separate from the movie itself.
Yes, it's a good score. Although I think his best film scoring work is his other film that he's done, which is Oblivion. Which was fairly epic, but the studio really kind of reined him in a little bit too much, because some of his best scoring for films is actually not anything he's done for a film, but on his albums. So if you have any interest in M83, check that out. I think it's from his double album, Hurry Up, We're Dreaming. There's some really awesome stuff.
It's a really good album. So the next thing that we're going to talk about, the French like to call mise en scène.
And this is kind of our dump category for cinematography, production design, kind of like the look and feel of a movie. And again, I have to call out films like Dr. Sleep, and for some pieces in it, I would say, as far as the overall film, definitely Midsummer. We've got Parasite, which is just classic photography of interiors most of the time, which are beautiful cityscapes that are beautiful, even though they might be dirty or, you know, ghetto-ish or whatever you want to call them. Parasite was brilliantly shot. The Lighthouse, black and white photography. The aspect ratio was you know, specially done for this, and it's beautiful black and white photography. Although I didn't get taken aback by it as much as I did, say, Midsummer or even Parasite. You know, and those are my call outs for the year as far as cinematography and horror. It was a good year just because those are such standouts, not just for horror, but for film in general.
Well, and I think it's important to mention too that you know, The Lighthouse was nominated for an Academy Award for its cinematography. So obviously, you know, the Academy voting public, or, you know, they agree. And I happen to agree with them. I thought it was a fantastically shot movie. It was very, very pretty to look at. And I was about halfway through the movie before I even discovered that the aspect ratio was different than what I was used to. It's almost like watching something on a television at the theater, you know? And I mean, it's just something that I'm not used to seeing. As far as production design goes, I mean, I would agree that Parasite is great. It's wonderful to look at. I really enjoyed the shots they did in that movie where people are sitting in that living room and they have those huge windows overlooking that massive backyard, right? And it was just like lush and beautiful, as, you know, compared to the harshness of the city that, you know, some of those characters are coming from. As far as like set pieces go, though, I really think that Ready or Not created a wonderful environment for a horror movie. You know, it sort of brings me back to my love of Clue. So we have this huge house with like room after room, and everything is like put together in just such a way to really create a mood and atmosphere for that movie. I think that whoever dressed that set needs tons and tons of props.
Now, I thought I remembered reading that they had to rent that house essentially to film there, and that they really couldn't touch much.
Oh, really?
But that's why I didn't include it. So
maybe I should have done my fucking research before I said
whoever owns that house, maybe that was Knives Out. I don't know. It could be both. What about visual and special effects? Did anything kind of call out to you?
Midsummer for sure. I really, I was just taken aback by all the effects in Midsummer. And mostly it was just, you know, it sort of made me feel like I was on a drug trip with these people, you know?
Yeah.
All the things that they did in that movie, like from flowers breathing and, you know, just herself sinking into the earth and things like that. It was special effects that really pushed the story along. And that's what I like to see. I don't need, you know, just some fantastic like creature, which is always good, you know, but I mean, I like it when
Godzilla did an amazing job with visual effects.
Oh yeah.
But Midsummer is so subtle in comparison, at least, with some really interesting touches that have a lot of more visual storytelling to them. But I also have to call out Dr. Sleep, just for at least for one scene alone, where Rose the Hat is essentially like going to the astral plane and traveling to, you know, go, you know, harass the little girl or whatever, or trap her. And it's an amazing scene. It's for visual effects, cinematography, and really just, you know, framing, how it was directed. It was just so well choreographed, and everything kind of came together for that scene. It was just beautiful. So, you know, I just had to call that out. But yeah, the visual effects this year, pretty standard across the board, except for those call-outs, I would say. There was no huge achievements.
And I have to agree with you on Dr. Sleep. And I think that during our hot take on that episode, we sort of, you know, gushed over some of the effects in that movie. So if you want to hear our thoughts in like detail on that, go back and check out that episode. I also want to call out I Am Mother for special effects. Yeah, I really like the creation of that robot was just fantastic. And, you know, some of the set pieces that I know they created with special effects were just like outstanding and astonishing to look at. And I also really like the special effects in Crawl. You
Oh,
know?
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, like those alligators were menacing looking, and some of the kills in that movie were just great. And all of it was done with, CGI effects. Like there's a scene where the alligator is sort of like two alligators are like fighting over a cop, and they break his body apart, and the effects are so like minute that you can see parts of his skeleton like coming apart with his body, and it was just amazing.
Well, a lot of the effects in that film are more subtle. Like they had to do a shit ton of water effects.
Yeah.
And those are hard to do, to make it look photographically real. Obviously, we're in 2020 now, so that's a lot better than it was 10 years ago. But yeah, it's a really effects-laden film, but you wouldn't really think so at first glance. Versus like the more obvious effects like Godzilla or even Brightburn, which used a lot of key effects for such a low-budget movie in comparison.
And I think, as years go by, we start to get better and better effects. And, and I also know that there's, a sort of push in the industry to go back to something a little bit more practical. And I think that filmmakers are starting to do that a little bit more often than they have in the last maybe like 20 years. I think that people are like not relying so much on computers and trying to do things that we've seen like maybe back in the 70s and 80s. And I'm super looking forward to seeing what they do or how they combine something practically and, involving, CGI.
Yeah. So what would you say for acting?
Actually, I have a lot to say about the acting in horror in 2019. I was just astounded at how good these people were in these movies. And I think, back to what we said earlier when we talked about that article about, 2019 being so fresh. I think a lot of this has to do with, the acting in these movies. I think a lot of it was very accessible, and it made it easier to watch the movie. You know what I mean? Like last year we were so impressed with Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary, and that was sort of like the tip of the iceberg. I think that this year there were so many horror performances that could have been nominated for an Academy Award or other awards that got lost.
Yeah, there's two that come to mind for me, and one is Lupita Nyong'o from Us. She did a huge amount of heavy lifting there with two different characters.
Yeah.
And Florence Pugh, who carried the whole movie of Midsommar. Without her performance, that movie just would not have worked.
And I completely agree. I think that she was like the heart of that movie, and her performance was amazing.
Yeah.
And she did get nominated for an Oscar this year for her supporting turn in Little Women. I kind of like to think that she's been given like a body of work award for this year. So Little Women, she's Best Supporting Actress. She was amazing in Midsommar. And she also was highly praised for her work in a movie called like Fighting with the Family. It's sort of like a wrestling comedy. And I think that, the Academy is sort of blanketing her work this year with an award nomination. Or at least I like to think that, you know. So, other than that, I really thought that Marianne Jean-Baptiste from In Fabric was really good. She was like one of the standouts in a movie that I thought was just sort of ho-hum, but her acting was great. But ultimately, as far as like an actress goes, I think that Samara Weaving was just like tops for me. She was so good in Ready or Not. She made me laugh. She made me scared. And she really just carried that entire movie for me.
Well, actors say that comedy is some of the hardest you can do as far as timing and everything. And Samara Weaving has that. She proved it in The Babysitter. And in Ready or Not, she definitely proved herself. So I'm all for that. And we're looking forward to another film with her that we'll talk about later on.
Oh, yeah. I'm super looking forward to that.
But I also have to call out Rebecca Ferguson for her Rose the Hat and Dr. Sleep. I also want to call out Rose Byrne for doing her voice acting role as the robot in I Am Mother, as well as I loved seeing Hilary Swank in that. And Hilary Swank did an amazing job.
Yeah, the acting in that movie was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Especially Rose Byrne. I really enjoy an acting performance if it's just voice. I think back when we did our hot take on I Am Mother, I mentioned how much I enjoyed Scarlett Johansson's performance in the movie Her, which is also just a voice work, right?
Sure.
And those things just don't get recognized that often, and it's kind of hard to do. And Rose Byrne did a very good job in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that I wanted to talk about is two performances from It Chapter 2, which is sort of a middle of the road movie for me from last year. But I really think that Bill Hader and James Ransom did a very good job in that movie. And they were both like sort of supporting characters, and they stole the show for me. I think that like the arcs that they went through were just better than some of the leading work in that movie.
Sure. Yeah. It Chapter 2, and really the first one too, is just really well put together, really well produced, well acted across the board. You know, everything kind of came together. We came in with super high expectations for Chapter 2, and probably that's the only reason I rated it as lowly as I did, which was a 3.5, which is not low at all, right? To me, that makes it a good movie, right?
Well, and then just two more performances that I wanted to talk about for 2019, and that is Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe from The Lighthouse.
Oh, God. Yeah, I have them written down. I can't believe I forgot to or didn't see it. Yeah, Willem Dafoe, right up there with anyone else that we've mentioned, if not passing it. It's one of the best, some of the best monologues and dialogues really I've ever seen in any film ever. And Willem Dafoe is just amazing. If nothing else, watch The Lighthouse just for that performance, because it's definitely going down in the history books.
And you are absolutely correct. I think that it is one of the most phenomenal performances I have ever seen in movies. He's so good in it. And I think that the fact that he has not been nominated for more awards this season is a fucking travesty. Mm-hmm. Like, I just don't understand how he did not make the list, you know? And to be fair, I have not seen, as of this point, like every movie that has been nominated for acting awards. But I mean, to me, it was so good. I think that it's literally one of the best performances this year, if not ever, in a horror movie or any movie in general.
He wasn't nominated for an Oscar for supporting actor for this?
No, he wasn't.
That's insane.
Nor a Golden Globe. I think maybe he got... Yeah, I know. Nothing. Got nominated for nothing. That's bullshit. This is like Toni Collette part 2 this year. I'm like, no. I will not stand for this.
Jesus.
I know.
Oscar's so not Dafoe.
No, Oscar's so stupid.
Anyway, let's talk about our best overall. What would you say is like in your top, just couple films, like your favorites of the year?
So I really, really enjoyed Climax quite a bit. I thought Climax was great. I didn't enjoy it as much the first time that I watched it. I had to go back and watch it. I've watched it 2 more times since we did our hot take on that episode. And it really has grown on me. And I thought about it quite a bit after we left the theater. And when a movie sort of sticks with you like that, it rises up in my list and my estimation. I actually went back and changed my rating of that movie. And the more I think about it, the more I watch it, the more I like it. Mm-hmm. I also really like the movie Piercing a lot. I really enjoyed like sort of the giallo aspects of that. And I was looking forward to that director's work on The Grudge, and so, that was our newest hot take for 2020. And I can't say that I was super excited about his work post Piercing, but I thought Piercing was great.
So you went into The Grudge with higher expectations than me then.
Yeah, I did. I liked his work. I mean, he did Eyes of My Mother a couple years ago and then Piercing this year. And I thought for sure he was going to take this movie in certain places because he's done such great work. Mm-hmm. I've talked about Knife Plus Heart a lot this year on the podcast. And, I sort of stand by that. I think it's a really great piece of queer horror. And really, like Chris said, on another episode, we were talking about it. It's sort of a movie that was kind of made for me. And I accept that. But ultimately, 2 movies this year I thought were really, really great. I rated them both 5 stars, and they were Dr. Sleep and Ready or Not. Mm-hmm. What were some of your favorites?
I would say, if I was just going to say a top 3 for me, would be Parasite, which is extreme horror adjacency. But it is so layered with the visual storytelling and metaphor and meaning and comedy and horror and real life horror, and drama and there's so much tension even before it kind of transitions into horror that it's just one of the most important movies of the year. I think it even made like Barack Obama's list, as well as it's nominated for not only best foreign language film at the Oscars, but best film in general. And that's why it's in my top 3. It's just because it's so layered and it was such just a well put together piece of film and a great story and with a lot of meaning kind of layered in. But I also like that director's other work. I loved Snowpiercer. I need to go see some of his other films, but
I think you would like The Host a lot.
As far as like straight horror, or at least straighter horror than Parasite, I would say Midsummer was my number 2 of the year. And I really waffled with that in my number 1, just because I feel like Midsummer is more important of a film than my number 1. But I mean, just from the acting, the visual effects, cinematography, the music, everything kind of worked for it. And it has a lot of things to think about, important things to think about in Midsummer. And I think it's going to be, you know, a sleeper classic of the genre for decades to come. But my number 1 of the year, just for not only quality across the board for all of the categories we've already mentioned, but also my level of enjoyment and surprise going into a film and having such high expectations and leaving with those expectations blown out of the water, for me, was Dr. Sleep. And that was such a welcome surprise. I'm like getting goosebumps. That was such a welcome surprise, walking into that theater with such high expectations and walking out with those just exceeded. And I was like emotional about it. Like it was just such a great experience. And I was like, this is why, you know, I do this. This is why I'm so obsessed with this genre. This is why I have a podcast, you know, and I just can't say enough about Dr. Sleep. And that's ultimately why it's pulled into my number 1 spot ahead of Midsummer, just because of the level of enjoyment I had. And at the end of the day, that's what I most care about, I think.
And I completely agree with you. You know, 100%. I think that Dr. Sleep was a fantastic movie. I know you and I watched it opening weekend. We both like could not wait to talk about that movie. And I think that ultimately, you know, goes to show you what a good movie it is. And I think that horror fans across the board liked it. I'm still very disappointed that it did not get the kind of like box office money that it should have. But I can kind of see why. It's been a long time since The Shining came out. And I mean, I don't think that a lot of people are sort of invested in that story, but I think that the horror community really embraced this movie a lot. There's a lot of love for it. And I know that the director's cut is coming out on Blu-ray very soon. And I know that everybody is like ready to watch that because Mike Flanagan created a masterpiece of horror cinema. And I mean,
I've got that shit pre-ordered, man. I'm so excited. One explanation that I've seen in the articles is that, you know, like the engine of box office for horror is really the younger demographic, right? Going in for a date night or, you know, kind of expecting a straight horror movie, wanting to take their girlfriends or boyfriends or whoever, you know, or a group of friends to enjoy like a thoughtless horror movie, or even just, you know, the younger crowd just trying to go see, you know, a Friday night movie. But Dr. Sleep was kind of marketed to more of the adult audience.
Yep.
And I feel like that might have been a mistake. You know, The Shining was seen as kind of, you know, a last generation classic. You know, I'm wondering if some sort of, you know, new sequel to, you know, The Exorcist or something like that might have the same effect. And so it had such a huge budget based on what it had to do, you know, for not marketing to the younger crowd, that it just they didn't see it. They weren't marketed to. They didn't feel like they were invited to go see the film, to have interest in it. And so it was just basically, you know, nerds like you and I went to go see it, and you know, there it is.
I will say there is hope for Dr. Sleep still, though. I mean, if the horror community or horror lovers out there do, is they will embrace a movie and through word of mouth, and sometimes it takes years for people to sort of realize, you know, what a groundbreaking movie, or, you know, how good a movie really is. And I think over time, people will embrace Dr. Sleep and it will be talked about, studied, you know, forever. I think that this is Mike Flanagan's masterpiece, really, at this point. I mean, from a person who makes masterpieces every time he gets behind the camera sometimes, you know? So I really went back and forth between Dr. Sleep and Ready or Not for my number 1 spot. Ultimately, I had to pick Ready or Not. Not that it's like a better made movie. I just think that it's sort of, the kind of movie that I like more. I had a lot more fun watching this movie, and I really enjoy like laughing and crying and being scared like all in one sitting, and it gave that to me. I thought that the performance by Samara Weaving, even Andy McDowell, and that crazy lady who played the aunt, just like this is a movie that I'm going to quote from here to the rest of my life. This is a movie that I'm going to recommend to people when they ask like what horror movie should I watch, especially for people who don't really like horror movies. I think this is a really accessible, fun movie, and I will revisit it probably more often than I'll revisit Dr. Sleep.
Definitely more accessible, just even by the runtime, for your average moviegoer. For it's a fun movie, and that's for all the reasons that you just said, it's in my top 5 for the year.
And with that being said, different from last year, Chris and I have created our own top 10 horror movies of 2019. And we are going to sort of like create a graphic or a post to put on social media. So head over to @TheFilmFlamers on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can see what our top 10 choices for 2019 are, respectively.
We'll also be able to add those lists to Letterboxd, so check that out.
Exactly. So, just like we did last year, we are going to take a little time and talk about the movies that we're most looking forward to seeing in 2020, specifically horror movies. So, Chris, what are some that you are looking forward to?
Well, not specifically horror movies. I'm looking forward to The Haunting of Bly Manor by Mike Flanagan, which is just like a collection of horror movies, essentially based on what he did with The Haunting of Hill House. That out of almost any horror this year, that was just the biggest surprise, and it was so welcome. I just embraced that wholeheartedly. I just loved every second of it. It was so well done. And then we got Dr. Sleep from him. 2019 was the year of Mike Flanagan for me. He just blew my mind in so many different ways. And I love his long form storytelling. And I can't wait for that. And like we said, the director's cut with Dr. Sleep a little bit more. But I'm really looking forward to The Haunting of Bly Manor. So that's like the number one thing on TV, at least that I'm looking forward to. But I'd say starting in February, I'm really looking forward to The Invisible Man by Lee Whannell with Elizabeth Moss. And the trailer for this just really showcased her acting in it. And Lee Whannell has proven to be his own unique, talented director, especially after seeing Upgrade, which was amazing. And of course, he's usually teamed up with James Wan, of course. They teamed up together as student filmmakers to do Saw. And of course, they've always worked together on all these things. Usually Lee Whannell's a writer or even an actor or even a producer level, but he really kind of branched out as a director on his own. And so far, he has been, hitting it out of the park. So I'm really looking forward to The Invisible Man coming in February. And in April, I'm looking forward to Antlers, especially because the short story is out there that this is supposedly at least partially based on, and it is creepy as fuck, and it is going to be amazing if they do it right. So I'm really looking forward to that. And in April, I'm looking forward to Antebellum, which I thought was a Jordan Peele's next movie for some reason, but apparently they're just using that kind of as a marketing tool to be like the producers of Get Out, the producers of Us, right? So it looks like a really interesting kind of take on another kind of story about, racism and stuff through the lens of horror. And it looks like it's going to be quality. So I'm really looking forward to that, as well as the sequel to Candyman, a direct sequel co-written by Jordan Peele in June. So I have high hopes for that as well. And The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. I'm curious. We'll see what happens, as well as Robert Zemeckis' take on The Witches in October, which I'm curious about. I can't wait for a trailer for that. The Witches was one of my favorite films as a kid, with Angelica Houston as the head witch. Loved it. And then, of course, in October, Halloween Kills Definitely looking to see where the series is going after this last one that we enjoyed so much.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a lot of those too. I mean, I know that The Invisible Man is really high on my list of things to see. I second everything you say about Lee Wanell. I really enjoyed Upgrade last year, and I'm looking forward to this. It looks fantastic. Speaking of James Wan, his new movie Malignant comes out in August, and it's supposed to have a real giallo feel to it. And I'm super interested to see what he's doing with that. This is coming right off of his directorial. He did Aquaman, right? This is his next movie. And then he also just wrapped his Mortal Kombat movie, which I don't think is coming out in 2020, but he's got a lot coming out. But in April, I'm looking forward to seeing The New Mutants. I know that movie's been pushed back so many times that at this point I've just got to see it, you know?
Yeah, me too.
It's just become a part of like horror lore, you know, and I have to see it. Antlers is going to be great. I already know. I'm super invested in the Purge series. Like I've seen them
Purge
all.
5.
I like them all. Yeah, the Purge 5. There's like no other title for it, but it doesn't matter. I will go see it when it comes out. I've already seen the rest of them. Halloween Kills, I think, I'm looking forward to seeing what they're doing with that story since the reboot from, what was it, last year that came out, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but mostly I am looking forward to a Netflix movie called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. And the movie's wrapped. It's done. It's ready to be watched. It's going to be released on Netflix at some point, but it's based on a novel that I read a couple years ago, which is completely bonkers and batshit. And I just cannot wait to see what they do in a film version of this movie. So listeners, if you guys have read this book, like reach out and let me know. And Chris, have you read it?
No.
It's a really short read, but it's completely insane. I think I have it on Audible. I should like just share it with you so you can listen to it on the subway or whatever.
Okay.
Like it's good. Well, aside from movies coming out in 2020, there's a lot to look forward to from the Film Flamers this year. And we're going to start in February. So next month, look out, because we are going to be covering one of Chris's favorite movies,
Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I know that he is like chomping at the bits to talk about this, and I am going to get such a schooling in filmmaking from him. So
No, probably not a schooling, just a lot of fanboy crap about how it was made.
And honestly, I haven't seen this movie since I was maybe like 19 years old. Well, Chris, do you have anything else to say about 2019, or shall we just like leave it to the record books?
Let's leave it to the record books, but revisit it often because it was a very good year for horror.
And I think that we shall. I know that when Chris and I choose movies that we deep dive into, a lot of it has to do with, you know, how we view things over time or how much we love things. And I think that 2019 is going to have a bunch of stuff that we're going to go back to and watch and have a lot of things to say about in the future.
That's right. In the future, we might just take a minute, but just a minute, to talk about 2019 movies.
Brown-haired niece. What was your favorite 2019 horror movie? Well, guys, thank you for listening to this year in review, and thank you for listening to all of our January episodes. As always, we want to hear what you think. What were some of your favorite movies from 2019? Maybe some of your favorite performances or any other category that we talked about in this episode. You can find us on social media at The Film Flamers on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and now Letterboxd.
And you can call us on our hotline at 972-666-7733. Let us know what you thought of this episode or any other, and we'll play your voicemail on the air and respond to it.
That's right. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcast or iTunes, go ahead and hit the review button. Give us a 5-star rating. Leave us a little snippet of a review, and we will read that on our Shooting the Flames episode. And also, head over to patreon.com/thefilmflamers to get all of our bonus content. We are creating bonus episodes every month for you guys, and we just restructured our tiers. So you can get all of our bonus episodes and early access to our regular feed episodes for as little as $2.
And look at our show notes every month to see who our wonderful patrons are. Include your name by becoming a patron. Well, it's been a long, good year, but I think we can finally have some sweet dreams.
That's right. So for the rest of 2020, I hope that we all have
Sweet dreams.